Welcome back to Draft Central's coverage of the 2020 AFL Draft. What a second round that was. We've seen mature age recruits. We've seen bolters. We've seen some sliders. We've seen clubs come into the draft for the first time. This is a jam-packed round, and we're throwing to Ed Pascoe, Michael Alvaro and Peter Williams to discuss the highlights of the second round.
Yeah, I mean, fellas, what a round of action there. As Siobhan said, sliders, bolters, a couple of mature ages coming in. My team, Carlton, got on the board, and I'm very happy with those picks, by the way. So I guess we'll start from the top. A couple of players who were sort of highly touted. Pete, Nathan O'Driscoll, Sam Berry, not lasting too long there. What do you make of it?
Yeah, no surprise there, particularly Nathan O'Driscoll. Like, we know all year he's been touted as one that could have gone anywhere, really, from between sort of 10 to 30, 35. He's ended up in that bottom end of that range, but we saw Fremantle trade up to get him, so like we knew that he was one that they really wanted to get. I think, Phantom Draft, we sort of had him sort of towards the lower end of that, but he ended up getting up in that with their next pick, which was fantastic. So I definitely think he's a great pick. And obviously Sam Berry, again, being that sort of real hard runner, being able to contribute, just an inside mid ready to, step straight in kind of thing. So I think that they get a couple of players that are sort of athletically from that sense, particularly obviously for O'Driscoll across the board, and then Berry for his endurance. They're able to really have an impact early on, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Collingwood as well would be happy with who they've got there. A couple of real sort of developmental types. Caleb Poulter, one of the great stories of this year, given his progress. His rate of improvement's been massive. One of my personal favourites. So it was a bit, it was a bit shocking to see him go to Collingwood instead of my boys Carlton there. But a gun. Liam McMahon was next off the board for the Pies. So I know, Ed, you've been pretty high on him. What do you think he's going to provide for the Magpies?
Yeah, so the Pies finally get that tall they've been looking for after taking a few midfielders the last few years. They get that developing tall. So Liam McMahon from the Northern Knights was only 193 centimetres last year, but grew up to 196. He's a great athlete, great leap. So he's definitely one to look out for as a high-marking type who will just be running out of full forward for years to come for the Pies.
Yeah, and we'll touch on the mature ages as well that went off the board there. Obviously, James Rowe's gone to Adelaide, the local boy. I think this was one where Carlton and Adelaide had picks sort of both back-to-back. They were probably looking at similar players. So the Blues ended up with Corey Durden, obviously the small forward, and then James Rowe probably would have been in contention there, ended up going to Adelaide. So he's the first one off the board. Obviously a real crafty, small, great goal sense, just a real natural footballer. Been overlooked, but was the leading goal kicker in the sample this year in the premiership team too. And Samson Ryan, a real sort of bolt out of the blue, Pete, from the Brisbane Academy. I know, Ed, you even sort of saw him a few times at Queensland and rated some of his upside. What do you make of it? I mean, it's a bit of a shock selection.
Yeah, about 206 centimetres. He's a very much a developing type. I saw him watch for a few games as a 19-year-old playing for the Lions Academy, and although there's a few skill errors he'd make, but you'd like it his endeavour. So he's the type of player that I think Richmond would look to really build upon. I mean, he's not going to reach his peak for another, till he's 25, 26. So they're banking on his upside later on where, they've got Nankervis who's been a bit injury prone, and Soldo is going to be out for the year. So having someone who is a big, tall ruckman could be a good option.
And just as we are now going live, Collingwood have done another trade because they, haven't had enough of that. They've basically traded in pick 44 to jump up. So far in this third round, we've sort of got Harry Sharp from the Rebels to the Lions, so we'll talk about that. Collingwood have just traded in from 49 to 44, so there's someone on the board they want right now. Yeah. So they're actually trading up, which is quite an interesting sort of aspect. And obviously Port, that was with.
Could it be what kind of position you
key
think
position forward.
You think
Come on, it's got to be Callow or Baldwin, I would think. I hope key position forward. Mm-hmm. But, they've done well so far, so we'll see what the Pies do here. But obviously it's someone who they don't think will be at that pick 49. So,
well, we've just had the pick come in. Now, it's Beau Mercury, a small forward from South Adelaide, a 19-year-old who's really impressed this year at league level, got a real bit of dash about him, good aggression, finds the goals, had a few really nice games a pretty neat player, I think. One who's going to fit the profile just for that need for a genuine small forward, I think. So, Collingwood obviously have a few sort of types who are a bit medium.
And they did take McMahon with the last slot. That's of course the other one where I guess a lot were sort of expecting more immediate key forward, but obviously getting McMahon, you can afford to get McCreary there as well. So
so he played in that South Australian All-Stars game as well. So he played really well in those games. So he's coming with a really good year, and he could be one that even plays some senior football next year.
Yes, Beau Mercury, another player that's sort of come from the clouds. But one player that definitely didn't come from the clouds is Errol Goulden, and it was no surprise that early in the second round, Geelong placed a bid on him and the Swans didn't hesitate to match that one. What will Errol Goulden bring to the Swans, and did you see him as a bit of a slider? And were you surprised that a club didn't bid on him earlier, considering the class he does have as that midfielder, small forward type?
Yeah, I mean, Errol Goulden's just the sort of player that plays with the same quality no matter, what level he's at. He's a gun at under 18s level. He, I think was second in a league best and fairest at senior level over in Sydney. So Swans are getting a quality player who they know the value of anyway. They've seen him come through the system. He's going to fit into their culture right away, and just a really sort of just a little jet, really crafty kind of player who's got great skills and has no trouble finding the ball. I mean, we look at other guys who we would have expected to go off the board maybe a bit earlier. Jack Carroll, I think, is one of the massive sliders in this draft so far. There's still a couple more on the board, but Carlton's got a bargain there. Ed, I mean, you're pretty high on his talents compared to Hugh McCluggage a little bit. What do you make of him?
Yeah, a little bit like Hugh McCluggage. I mean, he was one of the better contested players in the for the Waffle this year, but it's more of how he wins the ball. I think he's a bit more classier on the outside with that left foot. He really showed it in the All-Stars game last year with a really nice kick. So he's one who can play a lot of range positions. And unlike McCluggage, he's actually got a good leap. So he can actually really jump at the ball. So he can still play half-back, half-forward. He's a developing player, so there's a lot to really like about him.
We've just had a back-to-back pick here for South Adelaide. It's a good result. Obviously, after McCreary heading to the Pies, we've got St Kilda picking up Tom Highmore, which is another great result. I think that sort of brings into the whole mature age discussion, because we've had quite a few in this round, like the past round, the end of round 2 and the round 3. We obviously mentioned Samson Ryan, James Rowe. Now we're getting sort of the McCreary, who 19, not really mature age, but still over age. And then Highmore, of course, who I quite like. So I think that it's great to get these mature ages, because it is showing that they're ready to come in, and St Kilda probably need that type, the more experienced type.
Yeah, I think it's perfect for the way they're going. I mean, they brought in James Frawley, sort of, nabbed him out of retirement just to fill in, but long term, Tom Highmore is going to be one who can play for years to come. He's, as far as mature ages go, still pretty young, in his early 20s. Has played senior footy, in the NEAFL and now in the SANFL, and been a standout there, really. So a really great pick, one who I think would have interested a lot of clubs in this range, given the runs he has on the board, his strength now, and just sort of the ability he has as that sort of in vogue intercept defender. I think he's a quality pick there.
There was a lot of talk in this draft about the taller players and the key position players, but we've also seen quite a lot of small forwards get drafted, and even some that have slid. So we saw Corey Durden, the South Australian, end up at the Blues. Fairly late, I guess he was another slider, but quite a few small forwards get drafted in Jake Bowie, Bailey Laurie, a lot of the smaller type, even Phoenix Blicer, who was selected by North Melbourne. What can you tell us about the small forwards in this year's draft pool, and are they as prominent and ready to go for senior footy, such as the key position forwards and key position defenders that were drafted quite early?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think in general, a lot of the small forwards, given their role players, sometimes they can come in and impact straight away. Some of them being a bit lighter on, perhaps they've got a bit more time to develop. But, if you've got the pace, you've got some elite traits straight away, you can probably just have an impact.
Yeah, same as Cosy Pickett this year for Melbourne. Like, if they rate them highly, they'll give them time. And, I mean, the small forward's a good way to introduce players to the intensity that's needed as well, because the small forward in today's game, you've got to be good on your pressure, you've got to be able to run all day. So If they're ones that need to develop more, they will. But I mean, small forwards are really becoming very important, which Richmond have showed.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I mean, we've just seen another pick come through, Tyler Brockman, who adds to Seamus Mitchell for Hawthorn. They've got two really dynamic kind of smalls there. They've got really good pace, just explosiveness, bit of goal sense, just something about them. So, with the way that their list is going, they've just had Puopolo sort of come out the door there out of that side. Bruce might not be sort of the player that he once was. So they're going to have a couple of players for the future that are, just have something about them. Could be anything. They just might have a bit of development left.
Yeah, for sure.
It's quite amazing the amount of Victorian players that have come from the NAB League system that have been drafted, considering the COVID-19 pandemic completely wiped out their draft year in terms of being able to play football. There has been a high number of Victorian players that were selected. Looking at that, how many Victorian players do you think are going to be ready to go playing senior football, considering so many have not played any games this year? A lot have been drafted at the top end and throughout the draft in the second round and the first round as well. How ready are these Victorian boys going to be to step straight into AFL football?
Yeah, so it's going to probably be a bit tough for a few of them to get moving. I mean, they have spent a whole year not being able to play, but a few of these kids, like your Fraser Rosmans, did play at the start of the year and showed some really good promise. I mean, that's why, even though they weren't in the AFL Academy at the start of the year, they were quickly brought up to the Combine because they really showed signs even in the early games. And what we've actually found in the last few years is a lot of these players that play well in these practice games, they usually end up being the better players. So they're actually worth getting to. So I think the recruiters were really going back on that footage as well and really doing their research on these players. Like someone like Max Holmes, I mean, he has the not just the athleticism, but the actual natural talent that, warrants that type of selection.
Yeah, I mean, they'd be crystal balling. I think the draft in general is just a massive sort of, it's a stake of just predictions, you never know truly what you're going to get. So, you could take a few risks, you can just predict as much as you can, but at the end of the day, you never really know what's going to happen with that player until you get them in the club, you develop them. So, with that sort of aspect there, you can take a few risks, especially with the Victorians who have come through this year. They might not have played the footy, it might take them a little longer to sort of get into their pre-seasons, but at the end of the day, they're quality, they have good AFL traits, a lot of the ones that we've seen bolt. So, I'm sure they'll have no trouble sort of fitting into the next level.
Looking at some of the players that were selected early in the draft, such as Denver Granger Barras, even Riley Thilthorpe, also Logan McDonald, they've had that experience of senior football, whether that be in the waffle or the sandful. Can you tell us what type of advantage that gives them being able to play with those senior bodies compared to, let's say, an Elijah Hollands or a Will Phillips that has played mainly with the 18-year-olds, even though they are that top bracket of players? What advantage does it have to play against the senior bodies?
Yeah, it's something that's got pros and cons, doesn't it? I mean, being able to play against mature bodies, all those sort of kids would say it's a massive sort of, a pro for them. But in the same vein, these 18-year-olds from Victoria playing against each other, for most years, they're able to sort of gauge how they rank against the absolute top end players of their own age group. So, it has its pros and cons, but definitely guys like Denver Granger Barras, Logan McDonald, Errol Goulden's played senior footy. The list goes on. There's plenty from SA, WA, Sydney, Queensland who are playing against those mature bodies. So they're all advantaged probably massively there. But in the same vein, the Victorians, they're playing against, a talent pool that makes up 50% of the overall draftees. So, you have to sort of take it with a grain of salt. But it is a great thing for them to experience for sure.
And it's great to see the mature ages coming in at this stage. Like, we know that we've hit the point of the draft now where we're seeing some of those mature ages, or perhaps the development players or exciting ones that are coming through. And I just think it's great to sort of see that experience come through.
There are some players at this end of the draft that quite a few viewers may not be aware of. Can you tell us a little bit more about the likes of Seamus Mitchell, Sam Berry, possibly even a Fraser Rosman. Don't forget that you can access player profiles on Draft Central website for players from Victoria, South Australia and WA, but maybe a little bit more about the players that are sort of surprise packets that have come in the first and second round.
Yeah, for sure. There's been quite a few that have come in, and as we speak, we've got another. The Rebels duo that we were expecting to potentially get picked up have got picked up in this round. Obviously, we spoke quickly, sort of just before, about Harry Sharp, the elite runner, going to Brisbane. And Geelong have now picked up Nick Stevens, who's more of that taller defender type, with pick 47. So that's really good for them to pick him up. And Brisbane had the next pick, so it would have been interesting if Brisbane had been able to pick both the Rebels together, because we know how much they love their Rebels. So it's been great. But certainly, like if we sort of look back on the round, like obviously Fraser Rosman, great sort of outside, like developing type, quite someone who was quite good. And I know, Seamus Mitchell is an example, someone who you're really big on, Ed.
Yeah, so in the Futures game last year, which we saw, he was very creative. Like, he doesn't need that much of the ball to have an impact. So, he's a very busy forward. He makes things happen. He's got a bit of speed. He's got a bit of class. He's got a bit of upside as well. So you can definitely see why you'd take a player like him early. And with Fraser Rosman, like, he was one that really impressed me at the start of the year playing for Sandringham against the Oakley Chargers. He's a very dynamic player, a bit like a Jaden Stevenson. Even though he's 194, he kind of plays that more hybrid half-forward role. He's got a lot of speed, really good mark overhead. He can go for the wing and offer a lot of drive as well with that long left boot. So he's definitely an exciting player that, with a full season, could have been like a Miles Bergman from last year who pushed into that top 20.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to Josh Burke as well, outgoing Sandringham Dragons coach, he really praised sort of the raw athleticism of Rosman, and those traits are AFL traits. If you have the speed endurance mix, he's 194 centimetres. He can play as a key forward. He can play on a wing. It's just that dynamism that sort of makes him stand out above the rest. So it's really no wonder that he's been picked up. And we've still got the picks coming through. We've got Henry Smith heading over to Brisbane, Pete.
Yep.
What do you make of that one?
Yeah, another ruck that's coming through. So we're starting to see some of the rucks come through now, but still no Max Heath. That's the puzzle, because I think most of us would have thought that perhaps he was the first ruck to be picked. Obviously, we've still got Henry Walsh still on the board. Kellen Lane, I believe, still on the board. So there's still enough rucks floating around that we're around, but obviously they're starting to drop. So I just wonder if now those who need a ruck start picking them up now because they're going off. But Max Heath, bit of a surprise. Now, obviously, we haven't seen much of him, let's be honest. Like, he had a terrific pre-season, was, going to be Metro ruck, as you can attest to, Michael, talking to Josh Burke during the week. But, yeah, I'm a little surprised he's off the board. But obviously, Henry Smith, he's done really well in the sample this year down there at the Eagles. So how do you sort of see his game? And I guess with Heath, why are we are we surprised he's still not been picked up?
Yeah, well, I'll definitely give you something about Henry Smith and handball Max Heath over to Ed. But look, Henry Smith, Woodville West Torrens under-18s player, maybe doesn't have the sort of outward athleticism of other rucks. When you look at the sort of raw types, he's really lean, sort of that 200 centimetre type, but it's his sort of ability to impact at ground level and have second efforts, which is really impressive. He's not particularly quick or agile there, but he's just able to keep on, having that impact after he's, sort of contested in the air and had his ruck contests and things like that. But Max Heath, we know, Ed saw him in the pre-season, rated him pretty highly straight away, like all the recruiters and, Metro coaches and things like that. So surely you'd expect him to sort of find a home soon if a club's looking for a ruck.
Yeah, and the other thing with like Henry Smith is he did play a bit more key forward this year instead of a ruckman, even though he's that height. But Max Heath is definitely a ruckman. I mean, he wasn't really on the radar last year, but coming into this year, he just looked like he'd really gotten confidence in his body and what he could become. So he was a really good tackler, very contested, actually pretty good skills for a big man. And when the times where he did go forward, he's actually pretty good with his contested marks. So even if he doesn't get picked up, he's definitely one you'd want to look out for next year.
Yeah, I think that's something as well, that contested marking. Josh Burke, to touch on again, really was impressed with that side of his game. They were kind of shocked at how far he'd come along, and that they thought, we haven't really put that much work into his sort of contested marking. We gave him some stern words. We told him this is what you need to work on, but he went forward and dominated. And it was a real surprise that he was able to do that. And I mean, we talk about going forward, Sandringham Dragons. Ollie Lord is the next pick to Port Adelaide. So great get for Port. They've obviously sort of got a few key position stocks there. What do you think he's going to bring to Port Adelaide?
Well, it's a very Port Adelaide pick is the first thing I'm thinking because, we saw with Georgiades last year, they're happy to take punts on perhaps not necessarily lighter bodies, but like maybe what you'd say is more project players and transform them into ready-made prospects. Like Georgiades hadn't played in a year and came straight in. Like we saw, your likes of Dersma and Butters, very light players coming in and playing. So I think you'd have complete faith that's happened, and so I reckon he's going to be a terrific sort of addition in that forward line. And just as we say that, Essendon have made a bid on Brandon Walker, and may I just say, about time, because we were wondering when Fremantle was going to cop a bid. Everyone else has, so
like no worries at all in the end for Fremantle, because they we thought, would Brandon Walker or Joel Weston get a bid before that sort of pick 32 is what they originally had. No worries. They're going to get one at 50, and Weston will walk probably even further. So
Essendon could bid on Weston straight after too. That's the other thing.
You know what?
And it looks like they've matched it pretty quickly as well.
Oh, that'd be the quickest.
I mean, they got that Henry bid probably a little bit earlier than they were expecting last year, and it did cost them a bit with that first round. But what goes around comes around, and now they get a little bit of leeway with the likes of Weston and Walker getting later bids.
And this isn't just a sort of Dodoro move where he just annoys a club and he'll bid on a player there. This is a genuine, he is a very good player.
They've lost a lot of speed off that halfback Essendon, so it just makes perfect sense to look at someone like Walker, who is blisteringly fast, a very confident player, and he has a ton of upside. He could be a really damaging halfback for Fremantle in the years to come.
Yeah, we had him sort of in the top 30 in our power rankings, so it goes to show we rate him pretty highly. And you look at the traits he has, that athleticism, just the way he takes the game on, it's beautiful.
Exactly right. Braden Walker going to Fremantle there. Looking ahead at what Carlton have done in the draft, I have to bring that up and ask Michael especially. They've swooped on players that have slid in the draft, such as Jack Carroll and also Corey Durden. How do you see what they've picked up? Has that addressed some of those needs for small forwards and pressure type forwards and smaller mids?
Yeah, I mean, as a Carlton fan, I'm not going to hide it. I'm very happy with Corey Durden, obviously, with that first pick. I think the Blues need that long-term, genuine, small forward filler after Eddie Betts moves on. They've sort of got a few types who could rotate through there and play a role. Michael Gibbons is one. Jack Martin's sort of the medium type. That's pretty dynamic. But Corey Durden will be like a Dane Zorko type. I think that's the role he plays. And then Jack Carroll, massive slider, adds a bit of sort of outside class. I think the Blues need those genuine midfielders who can use the ball really well, and Jack Carroll's going to do exactly that.
Adds a good mix as well. Like taking the likes of Stocker and Dow, who are very much pure inside types, and even Brody Kemp, who could develop into a big inside mid. Carroll adds a little bit of class on the outside, which I think really helps complement their side.
And we were just saying about Dodoro maybe bidding on another player, and they've done it. Maurice Rioli Jr. We obviously that was a talking point before. Now, clearly, obviously been a part of the sort of NGA in there that he could have ended up at Essendon. Now, we imagine, given that Richmond are basically giving up peanuts to match, that Richmond will do that.
Pick that they've got.
Yeah,
exactly.
Famous name for the Tigers.
Yeah.
Like Essendon did interview him, so Essendon, this is a genuine interest from them.
But,
100%. I think we all expect Richmond to match the bid.
Yeah,
here.
and it's doing that. So they've come in and done that. What is great though, is obviously Richmond ended up bidding on Air, and now Essendon have returned serve on Rioli. So always a good fun. So obviously
and that's
Essendon
been
are on
put
the
through.
clock.
That one's been put through now. So
so Essendon on the board again. But I mean, we're sort of looking at highlights from Maurice Rioli Jr. and a famous name. You can expect a lot, I guess, of the cliched things in that he's that precious small forward, tackles so aggressively. Great goal sense,
a bit of Tip and Woody is another reason why Essendon would want to look at him.
Yeah, I mean, Fox Footy's had his play comparison to Daniel Rioli's cousin, which is quite funny. So a good one there. But I think he was super keen to get to Richmond as well, given the links with his father, the late great Maurice Rioli Senior, or Maurice Rioli, obviously he'll be playing with his cousin as well. So a really good thing there.
Fantastic to see another Rioli into the AFL system, with Richmond matching Essendon's bid for Maurice Rioli Jr. Looking at some of the other academy players and also maybe father-sons or NGA players, who's still on the board that you think a club might bid on, or a player that maybe you're surprised hasn't had a bid placed on them yet that's tied with a club?
I think as far as sort of rankings go, we've had Joel Weston around the top 30, so he's one who could attract a bid soon. Even one of the Adelaide boys, someone like Tariq Newchurch, could get one if the club's looking for another small forward. Ed, do you have any more in mind?
No, I think Weston is the main one that really should be getting there. Like, there's a few others you could maybe make a case for, but I think Weston, of the players that are in that maybe top 40 to 30 bracket, is probably the one I'd be looking at.
Yeah.
So
well, we've had a pass as well there from Essendon in between, so
that was literally a cheeky bid.
To do a few cheeky bids.
Okay, so we're up. Obviously, West Coast of 52. So when you first get your first pass that we're winding down the clock now. So we might actually.
And this is West Coast's first pick as well, is it not?
It is. It's correct. Yeah, West Coast have their first pick. Fremantle might end up having to pick Weston just as picking him. Like at this stage, like that's the legit stage we're getting to. I mean, West Coast could always just be here,
it wouldn't be
and
surprised
Freo would just match it anyway, so that won't be a problem.
Well, what do we think West Coast is looking for here?
They've been linked to Callan Lane a bit, so I wonder if they go Callan Lane.
It's a weird one because they got Callum Jameson as well last year,
and they've got Bailey Williams as well, who's another ruckman type. So they may.
Well, they might
if they want to
shore
shore up those stocks, they might. But
I'd probably go Joel Weston. I think best available WA.
In our sort of phantom efforts with the Listics crew, shout out to them. We sort of, I think, Pete, you had West Coast. You had a couple of bids lined up there. So potentially just
bidding through a few, like Tash Schofield I bidded for. Carter Michael. Like there's a few there that are capable. I think it comes down to what you're sort of rating at that stage and what you might need, because you might pluck something out of an academy.
I'll put one forward to you. Isaiah Winder is one who they may pick, but I am told that the pick's already been made. So Luke Edwards is the one. We talk about players tied to clubs, things like that. Obviously, the massive talking point for him was that he was eligible to be a father-son for Adelaide. They opted not to sort of nominate him in the national intake. So,
and this is why.
Yeah, this is why, because obviously a club was interested in him, and it turns out to be West Coast. So, a kid who's played senior footy, obviously comes from great pedigree. Ed, tell us a little bit about him and why West Coast would have been interested in him when maybe Adelaide wouldn't have committed.
Yeah, so the way West Coast play their footy, they're very much a keep possession type and, work it calmly and get it inside 50. And Edwards is that type of player. He plays to his own tempo. He's a good size at 188. He's always played, half forward, midfield and half back. So he's a very versatile player, very smart player, and a good size as well. So there's a good chance he could even come in and play senior football if required. So, I mean, he's a pretty smart pick for a club that, might want some more ready-made players while they're in the window. Yeah,
I mean, it's an odd one. People may be wondering sort of why he slid. I mean, pick 52 is probably around his range, to be honest. But considering the talk that there's been about him over the last couple of years, he was highly touted as an under-16. He was already a great size, 187 centimetres, at the under-16s carnival, but he hasn't really grown. Do you think there's a sort of limit to his game, the way he plays?
It might be that lack of upside that might have a few clubs, like, they're a bit iffing and ahhing about that. But, I mean, his form has spoke for itself. I mean, he was very good at the championships last year. You know what you're going to get. So at least unlike, a lot of speculative picks, I mean, you know what you're going to get with him. So that has its upsides as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, that he's obviously going to be someone like, as we sort of said, with a premiership contender, being able to someone that can come straight in and have a real impact with them straight away. And we've had another pass with Fremantle.
We have, yeah. So that puts Sydney on the board. We'll see if that...
Interesting, Joel Weston.
Yeah, well, maybe they're expecting a bid, or they could get him through the rookie.
Yeah, they may think he's going to fall through. But even though they're passed, I don't know if they still have the ability to match if they...
Well, I mean, they've got another selection coming up that hasn't been wiped. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not they just take him with the last pick and that's it, or, whether he goes through the rookie, which would be a bargain.
Great to see Luke Edwards get a chance at the West Coast Eagles. We have seen some passes. Do you expect many more players to be taken, taking into consideration the list cuts? And are there any players on the board outside of Joel Weston that you think really deserves a chance on an AFL list?
Well, I wonder if right now Sydney take a chance on someone like an Ollie Davis. I just wonder. They're, wanting maybe an inside mid. They managed to get Logan McDonald. They managed to get, obviously, the outside talents with Campbell and Goulden, obviously, that can play inside for Campbell. But if they get maybe an inside mid, he's someone I'd be thinking.
Ed, Peter, I will cut you short there because they have passed on the pick, unfortunately. Okay. But nice thinking, because I would tend to agree with you in that they could look to that midfield depth. It's interesting in terms of players who may be sort of still in contention. I mean, Isaiah Winder would have been in contention with West Coast, as we said. There's guys like Zach Demesnu's played senior footy. There's so many on the board now. Still, I think,
we haven't had a Tasmanian picked yet. That's the other thing.
Jackson
Callow's still on the board.
Kane Baldwin as well.
And Richmond's coming up in a couple of picks. So
this could be a key forward here if Richmond decide to take one. So
and Kane Baldwin, if there was any club that would look at at a bit of a and they've passed as well. So Richmond have passed as well. So we're getting a few of those.
Yeah, we're going to get. Well,
St.
will there be
True,
another?
Ginnivan.
Yeah, will there be another pick? Like we've still got a fair bit. So we haven't had a Tasmanian picked as of yet, which is obviously a bit unfortunate. So they're winding down the picks. Obviously, we will have a rookie draft, so that'll be fantastic, and we'll bring you all the coverage from that. Perhaps because of the year being the year it is, and obviously with list cuts and everything like that, clubs are preferring to maybe chuck them onto rookie draft. Like we know Collingwood, for example, wanted to come in and perhaps only pick 5. They've ended up going 6, so they actually did the opposite and did their maximum. Perhaps some of the clubs here are sort of thinking, no, look, we can just sort of slide through the rookie draft just go from there and maybe pick a few speculative types. But, it'll be interesting to see if there's any more picked.
Yeah, one of the players that I'm surprised hasn't been picked up yet is a player like Eddie Ford. I had the great pleasure of watching him play on grand final day, and he's one of those players that is very mercurial. He can do things that other players can't, and does things that make you think, wow. Do you think he's a chance to get picked up as a rookie or later in this draft? We are seeing quite a few passes. We've seen another one there. Is he a chance to be picked up in the rookie draft? And how many players do you think clubs will be willing to put on the rookie list tomorrow?
I mean, Ed, you're very high on Eddie Ford. I know that, and me too. I mean, I like him. Ed, you probably had him almost in that top 30, didn't you? So definitely a chance in the rookie draft. He's probably got all the traits that you'd like. We saw a guy from the Western Jets last year in Josh Honey get pushed through to the rookie draft. He's similar in that sort of explosive nature, the way he can play midfield and forward, takes high marks, runs, he's quick, so there's plenty about him that clubs would look at. It's still not over. We're getting passes now, but dogs are on the board. It's just about in. So guys, are there any other ones that we think can happen?
Well, here's one. The bid's pending. They have bid on Cody Brand. So basically what that means is, Essendon realistically don't really lose much. They're effectively going down from 67 to 71.
I think this is probably a guarantee to be matched, 100%, to be honest.
I agree.
He's, lifelong Essendon supporter. He's from Calderway. He's been coached by Dustin Fletcher at Peg. So I think it's a pretty obvious one for them.
Well, the question is then, of course, if they're going down that key route, do they look at Callow or someone like that potentially, depending on what they do? They might look at Tall.
They could do that. They've just got in, obviously, Jamari Ugle-Hagen's that great support for Norden for the doggies. So do they look at the other end, maybe shoring up, getting a developmental player, even a ruck? They got Stefan Martin, but then apart from that, Tim English. So they could get a long-term option there. There's plenty they can do. There's so many good players on the board. So,
I think we know they'd probably go Tall because their midfield's stacked. So,
absolutely, yeah.
I think that if they either go Tall or they potentially go around the
flanks,
field,
and they could look for a few more forwards as well, a few more mercurial types.
Yeah.
Well, they could go Eddie Ford and from Western, down there. So, we're assuming, obviously we're still waiting, but we're assuming Essendon will match that pretty quickly. I think that'll be expected.
we can't finish up draft night without discussing Collingwood and the way that they have sort of had their moments in this year's draft, bidding on quite a few players, going through quite a lot of trades, but they've also somehow managed to pick up quite a few quality players such as Oliver Henry and filled quite a few needs. I know, Pete, that you were quite impressed with what Collingwood have done. Can you talk us through the roles that they have filled and how they've somehow managed to take players such as Finlay McRae and Ollie Henry that maybe should have gone higher in the draft with some smart trading and smart bidding?
Yeah, I think they've done fantastic because I think you could almost argue a case that everyone, bar maybe Beau Mercury, who was obviously their last selection, has sort of been taken later than you would expect. So I think that's a great benefit for them. Obviously, having Ollie Henry being able to be the switchman up either side, you've got the midfielders you've included and Oakley teammates in McInnes and McRae, and then obviously Liam McMahon as well. You've put in there, which is fantastic, and Caleb Poulter. Like that's the thing you keep forgetting. He floated all the way out to 30. So, I mean, Collingwood, they might have been the big losers in the trade period, but for the picks they had, they could well be the big winners.
This is
value
huge.
wise.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really make up for it.
Yeah.
But they've brought in some serious talent and guys who
Very exciting players as well. Like they've got players that, the potential to put bums on seats, these types of players. I mean, you don't really need it with Collingwood, but, after a few supporters are a bit iffy on the trade period, I think a lot of these players should really excite Collingwood fans.
Yeah, they've either got athletic traits or they've got great ball use, which is what you've got to use one way or another. And, of course, Mercury being that extra year old as well. And they obviously really rate him, trading up to get him, thinking that he was going to go in the next few picks.
Yeah,
So.
I think like last year, they were one of the big winners as well, but it was almost accidental in the sense that they got a couple of sliders and it's like, oh, well, you know what? Let's throw what we had beforehand out the door, stuff the strategy. We're not looking for a tall. Let's just get all these quality kids in, Trent Bianco, Jay Rantal, who other clubs for some reason don't want. And, they did that and now they've come in and really sort of been bold. They got into the first round with that sort of disastrous trade period, but it's sort of starting to pay dividends in the way that they used them, the way that they traded and really got busy with their picks. So kudos to them. They've sort of, they've had a bit of good come out of, a pretty rough patch for the club. So, if I was a Pies fan, I know Pete's happy. I'd be really happy. A couple of my favourite players, in their crop. So, yeah, big thumbs up for them.
Yeah, I think a lot of the club supporters will be really happy with what they've ended up with, definitely.
A question for you guys, not so much based on players' abilities, but more so that we found out that Will Phillips, who was taken with pick number 3 to the North Melbourne Football Club, has been given Boomer Harvey's old number, jumper number in number 29. So obviously the club think he's going to be an absolute superstar, and I think most of us can agree. How do you think that these players cope with the pressure of all of a sudden they're playing for the Oakley Chargers and then they're in an AFL environment with running around in a famous jumper number? Just recapping the top 10, we had Jamara Ugle-Hagan taken at pick number 1, Riley Thilthorpe taken at pick number 2, Will Phillips at number 3, Logan McDonald at number 4, Braden Campbell at number 5, Denver Granger Barras at number 6, Elijah Hollins at number 7, Nick Cox at number 8, Archie Perkins at number 9, and Zach Reid taken at pick number 10. How do you guys see that the top-end players that have quite a lot of pressure on them transitioning from that under-18s environment into the AFL, the big league?
Yeah, well, I think, Siobhan, you could probably talk more about Will Phillips and the number 29 jumper. I think you got a little bit emotional there, seeing Boomer hand it over, given the history and stuff like that. But, I mean, it does put a little bit of pressure, but I think Will Phillips is the type who will really take that on and thrive in it. He's, I think, a lockdown 250-game sort of player.
It shows North's belief. If they're giving him that number, that shows that, they're really committed to this kid long term. They see him as a future leader. I mean, that's why they picked him at such a high pick. So, I mean, I think it's a pretty. He's going to be a player that will be right up there in the rising star next year. In terms of players that will be ready-made, I mean, people liken him to like a mini Matt Rowell, and he really showed that in the finals last year for Oakley.
Well, I think it'll be like Caleb Sarong sort of burst onto the scene this year in Fremantle's midfield. I think he'll be similar in that way, in that he's a smaller type, but you can just win the ball. He's a natural footballer. knows how to find the ball, just can play. And we've got another bid come in. The doggies are getting busy in that department, and I think they're doing the sort of dirty work here for other clubs. And I mean, it's not an annoying one; it's genuine, because Joel Weston could be that sort of small forward that they might have been after coming into the draft, but I mean, Fremantle are going to match this
Fremantle will match. That'll be a lot quicker than Essendon took.
I mean, they had to match a bid at pick one, so they're like, let's just
maybe
let's
Fox
just
were on the
bid on
phone
these
to
ones.
Essendon and helping them sort of drag it out a bit on the coverage. But I mean, this one's going to be a quick one.
No brainer. Definitely Fremantle. Like, Fremantle would love what they've been able to do. You know, they've been able to pick up players before them, get late bids, not have to go into deficit. When their bids have come, it's just been literally their next selection. So I think it's a great result, and Fremantle are definitely among the best, and they've matched it. So let's see whether the doggies actually do it or whether they're going to pass.
Back on the board, we could have another bid. So stand by. We'll see what happens there. I mean, if that does happen, who are we thinking? Because Joel Weston was the one who we thought would be that next bid. Are there any more? I mean, doggies themselves have sort of Cody Rock, Ewan McPherson, who they have access to. Probably would prefer to get them as rookies though.
I think, and they don't have to bid for them.
They don't, But I mean, to round out the haul, they could just snap them up and then not worry about chucking them on a rookie list. Well,
it's quite interesting. Obviously, there's still a fair few Queenslanders left on there, whether or not they go for them or go through the rookie draft. We know, which we should mention prior to the day, obviously Gold Coast pre-listed players, like we knew for a long time out, Alex Davies and Joel Jeffrey were going to be pre-listed.
Yep.
And then when the draft list came out, we noticed that Aiden Fife and Reece Nichols weren't on it. So therefore, unless they changed their mind and weren't going to go for the draft, it meant they'd been pre-listed. So I think that's great. So obviously there are a couple that have come over. So it's been quite good there, and we've obviously got another pick that's just
we're waiting to see it roll over.
To see whether the doggies are actually going to make a selection.
The suspense is palpable here.
We're down to the end. There can't be too many left. But we're probably down to the last handful of picks, probably half a dozen at max.
Well, we did expect sort of that 50 to 60 range. So I mean, we've gone on. We're at 55 now. We've had a few passes, so we're ticking over 11 o'clock at night here in Melbourne. So it does look like the pick is in though. Who have we got here?
Yeah, so we got Murray Bushrangers Dominic Bedendo. Really, good kid. Got great upside. That sort of taller forward, the 188 odd sort of centimetre forward. A lot of upside, some great athleticism, very, very raw. But it's not quite that key forward, because they got that with Ugelhagen, but we were speaking about them bolstering up their forward line. So I definitely think Bedendo's a really good choice there, because he does just that.
Massive upside. I mean, he was one I saw in that Futures game that Seamus Mitchell played in, and he just had some real star-like qualities. I think Fox Footy being a bit unkind to him with a 91 ranking, but I think he's got some massive upside, very exciting, good leaper. So I think along with Jamal Ugelhagen, they've got a lot of really exciting players to look forward to in that forward line now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we spoke about the Norden Ugelhagen link. Bedendo's going to be one who develops maybe a little bit over time, sort of has a bit more, bit more development left in him. So as that sort of raw, skinny type, he's got a great mark, great leap, all the athleticism you want. So.
I actually totally forgot the Dogs were even in the draft, because obviously Ugelhagen,
well, they had
cleared out their whole
picks,
list,
pretty much wiped out. So that one late pick, they're making use of it, which is great. And St Kilda's picks rolled in as well, so it'll be interesting to see if they passed. I believe they have. So Brisbane back on the board here, and they've got a few academy kids they might want to take in.
I think they're a likely one to pass as well.
So I mean, they nominated a heap of them as well, which is interesting. So.
Might look to go the rookie draft and pick a handful of them up, because that's what they can do if they're not going to get any bids on them.
I mean, they've all had a very long night, so I think they want to get a bit of sleep and work out who they've got to work with.
They're not going to worry
draft.
about list management. They want to get to bed. No.
If you look at them on the screen, they look a bit. Yeah, they've had a long day.
Yeah. No, definitely.
We saw before the Joel Weston bid came in that the Western Bulldogs did bid on Cody Brand, who's a Essendon Next Generation Academy prospect, and Essendon had no hesitation in matching. This one's for Ed. What type of attributes will Cody Brand bring to Essendon, considering you also have a key forward that was selected at pick 30 last year from the Calder Cannons into Harrison Jones? Do you see both Cody Brand and Harrison Jones developing together in the Essendon forward line?
Yeah, so Cody Brand, although he did play a couple games up forward, he's definitely more of a key defender in a real stopper. So even though he's 196 centimetres, he has a great reach and a great leap. So he'll be able to match those, those 200 centimetre types of forwards. And he's a very competitive player. Like, he really goes in hard. He's a good long kick. He's pretty good user as well with that long kick. And just overall, he's not a bad athlete either, and very vocal. Like we saw, me and Michael would have seen him last Wednesday. He's one of the more vocal ones out there, getting around the boys. So he's going to be a really good one down back with Nick Cox and Zach Reid. I mean, that future really tall lineup. I mean, it releases like long term Ridley and Aaron Francis. It really releases those guys who really rely on their rebound, and it just makes that back line just start to look really dangerous, to be honest.
Well, I mean, could that free up Aaron Francis, the guy that you mentioned there, to sort of push up to a wing? Because it's a position that you maybe don't have genuine wingmen. So
I don't think he has the endurance base to be able to play on the wing. If anyone, it'd probably be Nick Cox, which is also not a bad ploy either. Like he has played a lot of wing for the Northern Knights. He's a very good user of the ball, can go wing and forward, and he is an endurance freak. And so he's actually probably the more well suited to the wing. And even though he's a light body, I think he could still play some senior football next year. I mean, they picked him at pick 8, so they really rate him.
Go.
Yeah, and
big one.
Siobhan's jumping on the spot because North Melbourne have selected their pick. They've gone with Eddie Ford. Obviously, a guy that...
I like to comment, funny enough, I rate him higher than any other North player they took except for Will Phillips, and they've taken about 3 or 4 players before him, but he's one that's got massive upside. So he's one who... So he actually went to Fremantle and asked them for some tapes of Nat Fyfe. So he sees himself in the future as a big inside mid who can go forward, that damaging Fyfe type player. So he has a lot of self-belief that he can be the best player in the draft. And, the COVID really ruined his season, so he could really show that midfield craft. But, he's got a lot of upside, a good size, and I think North supporters will be pretty happy with, the likes of Spicer and Eddie Ford. They're the real spark. I mean, whereas Phillips and Powell, they're the more dogged, real inside, and Lazaro as well. I mean, you've got the grunt and you've got the game-breaking ability. So it's actually a very good mix by the end of it for North Melbourne.
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely sort of got a bit of diversity now with that midfield mix. So, we sort of questioned when they got Phillips and passed sort of on Hollands there, and then they got Tom Powell, 2 probably similar types. Now they've got Eddie Ford. You throw him in the mix with all his potential, a bit of speed with Lazaro and that tackling pressure. And Spicer as well. Probably play him on the outside and then roaming forward. So, I mean, there's a little bit about their mix now and some diversity, some pace, explosiveness, just something different to what they've got at the top end there in those dependable types.
Great to see Eddie Ford get an opportunity at the North Melbourne Football Club. Do you think that he would be ready to play senior football straight away? And do you see him as one of the biggest sliders of this year's draft? And if it's not Eddie Ford, who do you see as a player that you think has slid quite a lot?
Yeah, I mean, before Ed snatches it, he definitely would say so. I think he is right up there in terms of the biggest sliders. But, I mean, it's all relative because you look at even the top 10, you had Elijah Hollands get down to number 7, and you can sort of say that's a slide of sorts. So, and then you look at Jack Carroll, he was a big one as well. There's all the way through the order a few different ones, but Eddie Ford noticeably, given how highly he's been touted.
Now, this is a really interesting link as well. I mean, a couple of years ago, they took Curtis Taylor, who was a similar type, that half forward who can go through the midfield that a lot of people thought would probably go high, that drifted late. And wouldn't you know it, he's been really good for the North. He got some games early on, and this looks like another Curtis Taylor pick, another really good value pick for North Melbourne.
Yeah, I mean, he had... haven't even mentioned Curtis Taylor yet as well. I mean, you talk about this sort of forward line that they're building, that sort of midfield, the balance inside and out. He's one that adds to it as well. Carlton's just passed on a pick as well, so it looks like they've packed up to go. Adelaide on the board again. could look to bring in another player, but I mean they're really
probably likely
massive.
to pass and
Yeah.
see if Newchurch or Borlase make it to their rookie picks.
That was the plan coming in as well, wasn't it? That they were going to look to have them.
Yeah, and
slip
they've
all
done
the way
that as
through.
well. Yep.
Yeah. So North Melbourne again on the board. I mean they've brought in a massive hand as well. They've taken some of the most picks out of any club, probably barring Collingwood, I think. So yeah, I mean, surely that's going to be passed soon, unless there's a player that they really, really like. But yeah, Siobhan could be jumping up and down on the spot again, but we'll see.
Great to see picks still coming in and lots of kids still getting opportunity both today and tomorrow. And there certainly are other pathways as well if a name isn't called out tonight. Looking at the draft overall, in terms of the midfield group, do you see that there's quite a few more inside midfielders in this particular draft rather than outside in the likes of Sam Berry and some other players that have come through? Or do you see that there's been a nice blend of both inside and outside mids that are in this draft pool?
Yeah, so there's still quite a few inside mids that are available in Xavier Maher and Zane True, who are both really strong inside mids. So it really does show that there is good depth in that area for this draft. And I mean, you've seen a lot of the really nice outside types like your Max Holmes, Bowie and Laurie who got taken early on. So there has been a bit of a focus as well on the real skill and class, which has been shown, like it's still important. Like you can have your really quick players, but you also need your real outside class and good ball users.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good comparison as well, or something to sort of analyse from the draft crop, is that, from a long way out, the talls were touted as, a big sort of feature of it at the top end. So, we've had McDonald, Thilthorpe, Ugelhagen all go within the top few picks. Denver Granger Barras was right up there. And all through the order, we've had, talls sort of filtering in, a lot of high upside sort of types as well. So that's been a great feature of this draft. I think next year it's going to revert back to the midfielders as well. So it's going to be interesting. It changes every year. And we keep getting some passes as we speak as well. So North's passed. We've got West Coast on the board now.
Now, that's only their second pick. So they could, they
could
were weighing up whether they were going to only take one or potentially, if they're going to use it, they have. And West Australian, Isaiah Winder's been picked up there. So, he's quite obviously athletic type, unbelievable in that regard. So, I'll throw it over to you to talk about him.
Yeah, the Wiz, I mean, he blitzed all the combine testing in WA. He was, obviously quick, agile, got a good leap. So I think he was really impressive. Fox has him listed as a general defender, but he sort of burst onto the scene as a small forward of types who impressed with his marking ability overhead. So just his goal sensor and that sort of little factor as well were really key. And
he did play a bit of defence when he played senior football, so he went up. He even played on the dangerous Hayden Schloith from South Fremantle, who's a very well-regarded inside mid-half forward, and he did pretty well on him. So with his skill and composure, he's not at the same size, but I still think he'll end up a Sean Burgoyne type ability to play half-back, half-forward, midfield. I mean, he's got a lot of class, a lot of athleticism.
Well, I think the one knock on maybe his midfield time is probably his endurance and that work rate consistently throughout the game. So, he has played midfield. He racked up plenty of the ball at Colts level for Peel Thunder, and he definitely has just the skill and the natural ability around the ball, the clean hands, things like that, to play midfield. But will probably be more of an impact player, one who can run out on the flanks, whether it's at either end. So I believe we've got another pick in, Heath, so tell me all about it.
Well, I'll leave this one for you, Michael. This is one
I think we
very
all like
special.
This
fella, yeah, definitely. But this is one special to Michael's heart, I think.
No, well, I'm not going to take credit for him, but look, Cam Fleeton has been picked up by GWS. A ripping kid. He was set to be the co-captain of the Falcons this year, Geelong Falcons, that is. So, a pretty versatile kind of defender, just really tenacious, competes so well. Ed and I saw him at the recent Vic training session where he's going up against guys that have a bit of size,
they had Henry Walsh and Zach Reed, who were 202 centimetre players. It was very hard for him, but it didn't stop him from really competing. And he's one I got to pick in the Listics draft for the Giants a bit later on as well. So pretty happy to get him there. And I can see why the Giants would go for someone like Fleeton. He looks like the type who, can play a role off that half-back flank. He's a very, very selfless player. I think he's not going to have much of a go-home factor either. So I think he's one that could really fit into that role pretty early on. I don't think he'll take too long to get a go.
Well, I like his versatility as well. in the sense that he can play tall and small, but also lock down and then run off as
A bit
well.
like a Dane Rampy type. He's a left footer as well, good kick, a bit like Rampy as well.
And
so,
similar to Connor Idun too, from a couple of years ago, like off the Falcons, like so that undersized type thing. And of course, Collingwood have now passed, which we expected because the max they were going to take was 6. So, and Brisbane, well, they've been passing the whole time. So, whether or not we have too many picks, Geelong might go. They've still got a couple, so they might pick one more, and GWS could be on the ball. But I think we're in the very later stages of the draft now, and a lot of clubs will be storing it for the future. So it'll be interesting to see what clubs do from here for sure.
Yeah, well, the pick is in. But, we'll throw back to... It is a pass. We'll throw back to Siobhan.
Yes, as Michael mentioned, most clubs are now passing, but there are still some high-quality players on the draft board. So make sure to tune in tomorrow with Draft Central for all your needs for the rookie draft and players that will get another chance to end up on an AFL list. Looking at the players that are the bigger type, so you're looking at the top-end players such as Jamara Ugle-Hagan, Riley Thilthorpe, Denver Granger Barras, Logan McDonald, the taller players. Is this draft a draft that's unique in itself in that a lot of the bigger players are almost ready-made to just step into the AFL system and make an impact straight away?
Yeah, I mean, we've had, as I said, it sort of tends to fluctuate from year to year. It's a bit of a lucky dip. So, there are drafts, we had the King twins in the same draft with a few other talls at the top end, and then it changed last year, and now it's changed back again this year. So it really depends. I think it's a feature at the top end, and we knew it from a little while out that, this would be a great opportunity for clubs to stock up on those talls and get into the top end if that's what they needed. And, it ended up being Collingwood, Essendon were probably looking for them, and they found them. Plenty of clubs there were really vying for those key position players. So, GWS sort of has one in a sense in Cam Fleet and towards the back end. So, they're on the clock again. We're getting to see whether they're going to, make another pick. So,
I think they're the last club by the looks of it. They've got a few in a row. So if they pass, I reckon that's just about it. Looking at that, because I think they'll be the last ones to sort of wrap up. And of course, we've still got quite a few left on the board. So it's going to be interesting wrapping up. There's still quality, obviously, left in the rookie draft, pretty even. And they've picked up Jacob Ware. So that's mature ager, obviously. Michael, I know you were speaking about him off air. Give us a bit of an indication about what his best traits are and what Giants fans can look forward to.
Yeah, well, he was the one who was probably in contention with one of Carlton's picks as well. So he's just a really classy sort of outside midfielder or a halfback who just uses the ball so well. He's got great composure. Fit into that Woodville-Torrens senior team this year after really struggling to get a game in the reserves only probably a couple seasons ago. So, he's really come on. Mature age now, seems to have hit the right development. And Ed, I know you're high on him as well as one of those mature ages. The Eagles had so many of them this year, so pretty decent pick for the Giants here. Yeah,
I actually think he's my favourite mature ager that I've seen this year. Just with his ball use and his left foot coming out of the back line. He's got a lot of confidence, a lot of speed. I mean, he is rather light on, but he does, he could still put a bit of size on, but the question will be if he can really play on a good small forward, or he's got the size or whatever. But in terms of damage, I don't think there's many other halfbacks, especially in the draft, that really have his damage. Yeah, that sort of ball use, I think it's something, it depends on the club. But, just being able to make good decisions under the pressure of AFL football is so key. And given he's been able to do that consistently in a really good state league side this year at senior level, it's a great advantage. And it's a really low-risk sort of pick for GWS because, you're getting a mature ager. They're looking to move forward pretty quickly, get back into finals. He could come in and have an impact straight away, or, they haven't spent much on him. They could just keep on developing him and see how it pans out. So, yeah. And the Dogs have just passed, and Brisbane are the sort of last couple of picks left. And they've actually... Looks like they've left the room there. But, if they made a pick, potentially... Well, the pick is in, so we're going to see pretty quickly if that's... Or whether that's it. It looks like, they've passed. So that'll be the end of the draft for 2020 National Draft. We've still got the rookie draft tomorrow, but obviously some names just to chuck out before we finish here. From a Tasmanian perspective, obviously no Tasmanians drafted. Jackson Callow,
and Ollie Davis still on the board. We've obviously got quite a few. Max Heath is probably the big one from Vic
Xavier
Metro.
Maher.
I think
Xavier
Xavier
Maher
Maher and
was-
Zane True are
Exactly.
a couple.
So there's
Yep.
quite a bit of experience, like quite a bit of talent left in the rookie draft. I quite liked the rookie draft last year. I thought there was a lot of talent on show there. So we'll definitely we'll run through the rookie draft tomorrow and everything for everyone. But yeah, I'm definitely very excited about the rookie draft because it looks like that's a wrap for tonight.
That's the conclusion of the 2020 AFL National Draft. Before we go, I'll pose one question or two questions to each of the team. Who was the biggest slider? Who was the biggest bolter? And who's the player that you think will be picked up in the rookie draft tomorrow that wasn't selected in the national draft tonight?
Well, I guess I'll go first. I think it's a pretty obvious choice for the biggest bolter, Luke Pedler. Pick 11. I mean, from the clouds, they snapped him up Adelaide, with a few clubs lurking and looking to secure him. I'm going to maybe go a bit different. I'm going to say Jack Carroll for the biggest slider for Carlton. I think the value that he brings at the pick that they got him in, I think in the 40s, is massive. And the upside, the way that he's going to fill a need for their midfield as well, I think that's a great pick for them. So what do you guys reckon? We'll start with Pete.
Yeah, all right, I'll take it before Ed. No, I know who he's going to go for the slider. So I'll go Joel Weston for the slider to leave him the one that he's going to select with that one. And for the bolter, I'll go Ryan Angwin because I think that he was definitely one that I think has the talent to be where he was in sort of that top 20, but definitely he was the bolter for me.
Yeah, the bolter for mine will probably be Max Holmes. I mean, someone who only played the one NAB League game last year, didn't play any of the practice matches at the start of this year either. So, I mean, there's a lot of conjecture about, what he would have provided this year. He may have been one that would have pushed into that realm anyway, but the slider for me would be Eddie Ford, who's in my top 20 rankings at the moment. I mean, I just think he's got a lot of game-breaking and star factor. So, I mean, I think he's a really good pick at North Melbourne for that late.
Fantastic to hear the insights of the team. We thank Ed Pascoe, Michael Alvaro and Peter Williams for their unrivaled expert analysis, and we hope that you've enjoyed the coverage of the draft. Just to quickly wrap up, the top 10 of the National AFL Draft were Jamari Hagan off to the Western Bulldogs at pick 1, Riley Thilthorpe off to the Adelaide Crows at pick 2, Will Phillips off to the North Melbourne Football Club at pick 3, Logan McDonald off to the Sydney Swans at pick 4, Braden Campbell off to the Sydney Swans at pick 5, Denver Granger Barras off to Hawthorn at pick 6, Elijah Hollins off to the Gold Coast Suns at pick 7, Nick Cox off to the Essendon Football Club at pick 8, Archie Perkins off to the Essendon Football Club at pick 9, and Zach Reid off to the Essendon Football Club at pick 10. Thank you very much for tuning in tonight, and we thank the team and we thank you for tuning in to Draft Central's coverage of the 2020 National Draft. All thanks to Rookie Me. Be sure to tune in tomorrow where we discuss all the picks from the Rookie Draft. Thank you and good night.